All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Friday live stream. It's really great to be here with you today, even better, because this week we have two amazing guests, Shannon Mustipher and Karen Hoskin, who are here to talk about a really timely, important topic. I'm excited to get into it. Before we do that, real quick, I'm Will Hookinga from American Rum Report and Zavvy.co. And just want to point out a few ways that you can interact with our guests throughout the presentation. So if you're attending in Crowdcast, you'll see a chat over to the right. I already see a couple of people saying hello. Hey, John. I think I saw Eric K in there. Hey, Eric. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, there's a button at the bottom that says Ask a Question. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just click that button, enter them in there. If you see me looking to my left, it's because I'm keeping an eye on those. And last but not least, share the event. Invite your friends to join us. There's a button at the top that makes it easy for you to do that. But with all that said, for those who are less familiar, I want to quickly introduce you both. And I'll start with Shannon, spirits educator, bartender, author of a really great book that everyone should already have a copy of. I have mine right here, Tiki, Modern Tropical Cocktails. Highly recommend you get a copy of that. Also the winner of this year's Pioneer Award from Tales of the Cocktail and the IACP Award, which is very exciting. Shannon, welcome, and thanks so much for being here.
Well, it's so awesome to be here with you and also with Karen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Karen, on to you now. So founder and owner, Montanya Distillers in Crested Butte, Colorado. Leader in American rum and craft distilling for sure. It's great to have you back on here again. How are you?
All good. I'm glad to be here. It's a gorgeous day in Colorado, and it's nice to see some faces that I don't get to see in person very often. So I'm glad to be here with Shannon too.
Yeah, the sun like literally just came out in the last 30 minutes here in Nashville, and so it's great. It's coming right in through the window just in time for the show. So I want to. I know the two of you have done a number of events together, both kind of in person, online. I'd love to start with just like how did the two of you get connected, and what made you want to focus on this topic today?
Go.
Okay, so do you mind if I weigh in on this first?
No, go for it.
Okay, so we met a couple years ago at one of the New York Rum Fest, which is a part of a larger consortium of rum festivals. There's one in Miami called the Rum Congress. There's one that was in San Francisco, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that Federico, who does Taste of Puerto Rico, is also heavily involved in Zavvy.
Yep.
I was really loving not only Karen's vibe, but also her approach to production of her rums, and we just hit it off. And tell me if I got this right or wrong, Karen, but I think we met at a few of those festivals before you approached me to run a rum education lunch with influencers in New York City. I want to say that was like a year and a half ago that we started our first like official working relationship.
Yeah,
and it was
2 years ago right now. It was like October of 2018. Yeah.
Time flies when you're having rum.
That's great. Fetty's festivals are bringing so many people together. That was Karen. The first time I met you in person was actually at the California Rum Festival in San Francisco. I think I'd interviewed you once or twice before then, but I went to Zombie Village the night before the festival to meet up with another distiller, and I was sitting there at the bar waiting for him to show up, and I was like, oh my God, there's Karen Hoskin. I said hello, and you invited me to come sit down with you and your friends. It was awesome. So shout out to Fetty for doing those great festivals that bring everyone together.
That's so true. And I would just add to Shannon's story that, at the Miami Rum Congress, not in 2020, but in 2019, she produced an event at this incredible, it was like the secret tiki bar that was at the very back of a restaurant in this garden space. And I went and just sat at the bar of her event for hours, met everybody who was coming and going, which was awesome. And then I left eventually because I was supposed to be somewhere else. And the whole rest of the night, I was like, God, I just want to be back at Roval, it was called, in Miami. If you ever in Miami, you have to go. Cafe Roval. I just wanted to be back sitting at that bar drinking Shannon's cocktails, which were like being served in these copper coupes. And it was like there was water trickling all around. I mean, it was February and I came from snowy Colorado. So like pretty much everything was awesome, but that was extra fantastic on that trip.
Yeah, that's awesome. I need to add that to my list of places to check out in Miami, by the way. So the focus of today's session is kind of adapting to an environment of constant change, which obviously both of you, from the bar industry to the spirits industry, it's just been like nothing but change all year long. And, to me, one of the reasons I feel like this is important is because I think, people have been having these sorts of conversations, and I feel like some people kind of feel like, oh, like we've talked about this enough. But I mean, like, if you just look at the news, I mean, I know I just saw yesterday that multiple countries in Europe are reinstating their second lockdowns. Like, this kind of constant change environment is going to be here for a really long time. And so I think it's really important, to have folks like you putting y'all out in front of people to keep the conversation going about this. What made you kind of want to, focus on this today and make it the topic of discussion?
Shannon, why don't you lead and I'll follow?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to talk a little bit about details regarding what I've been doing during COVID and what I've discovered and what I've learned in terms of the opportunities that are out there that I think might be a little difficult for people to think about while they're in the midst of trying to hold on to the way things were and maybe grappling with the fear and uncertainty, which I think chokes off creativity, right? So when Karen and I were, speaking informally a few weeks ago about doing a Zavvi live stream, we touched upon this idea of how do we adapt right now and make it a little less about keeping things going, but also opening up your ideas and your thought process, and more importantly, your willingness to collaborate and step outside of your comfort zone to make something better than what we had before. I think a lot of us in these circles were doing quite well, and it's difficult to let go of that. But I think the bigger risk right now and the bigger opportunity that correlates is like, well, how can we make this even more juicy and delicious? Like, who's willing to really get out there, put themselves in the line, and more importantly, reach out to other people to help, assist, collaborate? That's, what this conversation was based on. And, Karen, tell me if I got this wrong, but I think that comes out of the relationship we've had thus far, which is about let's help each other. And we did it in fairly favorable conditions, and now it's a little more complicated, which makes it, to me, even more exciting.
It's so true. Shannon and I, like early in the pandemic, back in March, we would actually have these long phone conversations about, what were we doing? Like, what were we doing? And there was nobody that I felt like I had the most connection with on those topics in the industry. And, I'll never forget sitting out on my deck of my house in the cold, March or April weather, and just Shannon and I talking about our crazy prepper kind of ideas, what we were putting. But it's hard to find people that are thinking the way Shannon is, which I really appreciate, which is like, okay, it's awful. It's been awful, and it's going to continue to be awful for a period of time, and it's affected everything we do. But how do we become regenerative in that environment and try to do things that we've always wanted to do and didn't have bandwidth for, or that, how can we kind of be sponges and absorb all the opportunities that are out there? I just was able to get on a plane for the first time in a long time and really see what some other people in the world are doing. And I was like, oh gosh, that's one of the realities of lockdown and COVID is we don't travel as much. So we don't get to be inspired by our colleagues in the same way. So it's been a really fun ongoing relationship for us since we got locked down in mid-March, and we just decided, let's like have this conversation with a little more of an audience, and if that sounds good. But there's a lot more to it, all of our various individual pivots and pirouettes. So I got tired of saying the word pivot at some point. And, okay.
It sounds so dry and technical. It's like, can we have a little fun with it?
Yeah. So it's a very like Silicon Valley kind of vibe to it,
Yeah. Well, and you can only pivot in one direction at a time. You can.
Oh, that's interesting.
360 directions, and so that's my philosophy.
I love that. So getting into kind of the changes that are taking place, adaptations, what are some of the things that both of you have started doing differently or needed to do differently in light of the current environment? And Shannon, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, so coming off a year promoting my book and doing pop-ups and live events, I still had this big appetite for engaging people, and online was the avenue. And so the Pirouette involved learning different ways to engage people online. I think when people think about engaging online, it's like, oh, Twitter, Facebook, but in lieu of having opportunities to do live events, I knew that the offerings need to be.
Uh-oh.
Oh, maybe I froze for a second.
Froze, Shannon. Come back.
I started doing.
You're back.
Oh, did I lose you guys?
For a second.
Yeah, come reel back a minute or so, and now you're sideways on the screen.
Yo, I don't know what's going on here. Give me a second.
You may try refreshing. That might help. That's usually the adjustment that heals all.
I hear you now. That's good.
All right. I'm
there
back.
You are.
Okay, so going back to the early months of lockdown in New York for me, I was fortunate to had a couple of opportunities come down the pike to host happy hours, to host cocktail demonstrations. And I'd done things like that before, but it was very limited because I could do it live. And I realized I like being on camera. I have a lot of fun with it. And that in conjunction with more recent opportunities to create online content for brands on IG that was a little more tied to social media, kind of caused them to click in my head. It was like, this is where I was going to go anyway, right? Okay, I don't like to talk about my age, but my knees are getting wobbly, and my days behind the bar and on the road were starting to, come to an end. So my pivot was to just kind of push that direction of moving more in a media direction, being a media personality, as well as a journalist. I've been able to file some stories with a few outlets over the last few months. They include Thrillist, VinePair, and more recently Savor, which I saw as in the cards, if I want to focus more on my writing career and that passion for education that has played a big role in what I'm doing right now. It's like, okay, well, you want to do it. So now let's get cracking, and let's also serve the bar community as well as the consumer. How do we have these conversations about cocktails and spirits when you can't come into a bar? So that's been my pirouette. I've been kind of spinning over the last few months.
That's so interesting. And one thing I'm always fascinated to talk about with creative people is I feel like when your sort of creative environment or routine is changed in some capacity, and maybe you're focused on doing things in different formats, like you talked about being able to do more writing. I often hear people talk about how that in turn impacts the other creative things they do differently. So I'm curious, in your case, has taking time to focus on writing, have you found that sort of drifting into cocktail making or anything like that, like impacting it in different ways?
Well, for me, it goes more into recreating that voice that I would have as a presence behind the bar, right? When I'm chatting with the guests about like, how do you feel? What do you like? Let me explain this to you. How do you like this thing that you have right now? Those are very kind of intuitive and off the cuff, kind of like back and forth conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And now as a writer, I have to kind of slow myself down a little bit and ask myself, well, what would this guest want to know? And how far am I willing to go to, uncover that background information, those kind of juicy bits about like the origin of the spirit that's in the cocktail or the origin of this drink tradition, and make sure I really deliver on that, because again, there's a bit of a void in the space of being in a bar. And I just feel very challenged around everything I'm doing right now online to just give like more value than maybe I took for granted. I was just giving, behind a bar, being my charming self. It's like, okay, it's nice, but now you gotta, put a little more on the table.
Well, and I think you're really speaking to what was the biggest thing for me, which was what is the big problem? Trying to identify and diagnose, like, okay, we're locked down. Like back in March, my bar and restaurant shut down for 3 months, which was less long than a lot of people's. But I have 100-seat bar in Colorado, and it was kind of this moment of like, okay, what is the big problem here? And what I diagnosed was that I might be able to get online, kind of as Shannon was speaking about, but how do I get my rum in front of the person that I'm online with? Or how do I make sure they have a good cocktail in their hand? Or, that they're having an experience. I think we all have discovered that in marketing or in sales or even in being a bartender, in owning a restaurant, in, having a community, you're trying to create an experience for your collaborators or for your customers. And it just was like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to create an experience online, right? So I kind of would go to the very end of my story and work backwards. But like this week we set up on our patios. It's October, almost November, in a very snowy 9,000-foot mountain town here. But we just installed these little translucent pods outside that have lights and four tops inside them and little space heaters in them. And, people can come up and get a steaming hot cocktail at the bar and go sit outside in one of these pods. And, it's going to extend our seating by another 18 to 20 people much later into the season than we normally have. We also, in our collaborations with Rum Cask overseas, instead of just doing online events, they were sending these incredible tasting kits. A lot of us make minis. I make minis, sending tasting kits to recipients so that when I got online to do an event with them, and some of their events had like, hundreds and hundreds of people on them, they would be sipping Montanya rum. And it was like, those were the innovations that I was loving the most, was like where we could connect the people on the other end of the virtual transaction with the actual, Tiki, Shannon's beautiful Tiki cocktail from her book, or, so we're about to collaborate on the New York Cocktail Expo coming up in December. And that's a piece of it, is to get, Shannon's cocktails in front of the people on the other side of a virtual moment.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about some of the things that have happened that are good that otherwise probably wouldn't have, that you're kind of like forced into doing. Like we probably wouldn't even be doing any of this live streaming stuff. It was really a lot of the early COVID stuff that prompted Federico and I to start doing these live streams. And like some of them, I mean, we've been able to go to so many amazing places and like see so many distilleries that like I never would have thought we would have been able to do online because of that. One of the interesting things to me is obviously you're finding these positive things at the same time that you're dealing with extraordinary challenges, whether it's layoffs or having to close, or the negativity, how do you internally manage that stuff, being able to focus on the positive stuff while also having to manage and do real actual work because of the negative things that are happening at the same time?
Shannon.
Well, it's all a matter of perspective, right? So how are diamonds created?
Pressure.
Extreme pressure. Okay. How are metals refined?
You're getting too sciencey for me, Shannon. I don't have the science knowledge.
It's scientific, it's metaphorical, but the point I'm getting at is that anything of value has to undergo pressure and fire and adversity, in order to kind of strip away anything extraneous that doesn't add value, that will kind of dilute or kind of take away from the ultimate value. And it's not a fun process. In fact, it's rather arduous and painful. But I don't want to be like one of those people. It's like, oh, no pain, no gain. That's a little cliche. But the reality is that anything of value does have to undergo a process. And the last time I checked, it tends to involve a good deal of trial and error, fits and starts, things that don't work, things that are absolute nightmares. But that's how you learn. And that's how you discover how badly you want it, and the lengths you're willing to go to, and the resources that you need to draw upon from other people to help make it happen. And, it just, that's the way I'm regarding this. Because, look, full disclosure, I feel like I've taken a few slaps across the face this year. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I'm waking up and this has happened. I never anticipated this, and I don't want this. But, I can either just leave it there, or I can say, well, where's the opportunity? Where's the lesson? How do I become more resilient to this process? And I don't know about you, Karen, but I'm not one to go down easy. I'm like, oh, wow, you're throwing sucker punches? All right, let's do it.
I was making a similar, well, not totally similar comparison with someone the other day, but I was like, you in your kitchen, everybody now has these these knife blocks. It's like this little square thing, and it's everybody, certain knives fit in certain slots, and somebody invented that a really long time ago. And now every company in the world that makes a selection of knives uses that same design. And it may not be the right design. It may be totally flawed. Like if two knives have to leave the system, you can't easily go get two more for that slot, but other knives don't fit or they don't match or whatever. And it really struck me that we get in these ways of working and these ways of doing things. So we think, to be a prominent person in the rum world, or to represent your brand effectively in the rum world, or to represent your book, you have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars getting on planes, paying for hotel rooms, walking into crowded rooms, and making presentations. And somebody created that model along the way. And I've actually for many years thought, gosh, is there a different way? Is there a better way? Is there an alternative way that we could be reaching more people, like people from Eastern Europe, or people from, distant parts of South America, that they're never going to get on a plane or a train to come to the New York Rum Festival or the Miami Rum Congress. So to some extent, we end up in this crazy echo chamber where we're just always talking to the same moneyed group of people who can show up. And I have really tried on a regular basis to think about the fact that, sometimes models need to be changed. And sometimes the way we've gotten habit of doing things is not necessarily the best way. And it's moments like these when the rug gets yanked out from under everything, or everything we've been doing has to be rethought, that we have a chance to maybe radically change a paradigm. So I'm going to give you a really quick example. We do, normally on a normal year, we'll do a bunch of events and we'll bring people in and we'll feed them lovely cocktails and do rum tastings and education. And, maybe sponsor a film festival or a music festival and bring musicians in. And we had not obviously been able to do that for quite a while, but now we've partnered with a new technology, a piece of software where, we can bring people into a virtual event. We can seat them at a table. They can get up from that table and move around and go sit at a different table, small groups, much more conducive to conversation than a big 200-person call. And we can draw everybody to the stage and have a live music presentation. We can, potentially have them walk down to a bar in their neighborhood and pick up a to-go cocktail or two to have during this event. We partner up with those bartenders. It lets us support bartenders and musicians and conversation and introverts who don't want to speak up on a big multi-person Zoom call. And, that's the kind of stuff that I've really been delving deep into, is like, what are new models where we're going to be able to reach way more people in a really high quality experience virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I find myself a lot of times, and I hear this from many friends of mine, when you have a bad day or something, or you're really wishing that you could get out of the house and go somewhere like you used to, there's this desire for like, man, I can't wait for things to get back to normal. And we can go back to like doing stuff how we did it before. But what I'm getting a lot from both of you is like, obviously there will be positives to getting control of the virus and that sort of thing. But it also sounds like there are pieces that like, maybe there are some things we don't need to go back to doing, or that we can do differently for good going forward. So what are some of those things to you? What are some examples of, like, has this brought to light any long-term changes you would like to see in either the hospitality or the spirits industries going forward?
Shannon.
Well, I mean, I think that, to your point, the notion of going back, I think, is it's not something I ever entertain. Time doesn't go back. I think the sooner you accept that, the better off you are. And it's kind of a fool's errand to wish for that. It's good to acknowledge the loss, not want to discount that, but let's focus on what's possible, right? As opposed to what is. I like to use like naval analogies. Like, it fell off the side of the ship. It's gone. Maybe you can go get there, but I don't know if it's worth the energy to dive off the ship and try to retrieve this item. I think that in regards to the biggest opportunity is efficiency. Okay, so there's a brutal element to it, right? You see restaurants closing, or if restaurants are open because they have limited capacity, they have to streamline staff. And I hate to see jobs go to the wayside as a result. At the same time, I've heard this refrain from a number of people in the industry and without, oh, my job, it's just, it's too much, I don't like it, it's taking up too much time, I don't get to spend enough time with my family, right? So I'm going to veer off a little bit, but hey, if you're liberated from your normal way of making money, be it in this industry or not, maybe you have a lot of time to think about new ways to make money, to invest, to leverage, to invent, to create. I know not everybody is an entrepreneur, so take it, for what you will. Or maybe you just have more time to invest in your personal life, your family, growing a garden, whatever it was that you were trying to do to upgrade your life or your health that you've just been putting off. Maybe do that first, and then you have a moment of clarity to think about the job and the finances or what have you. But I think that everyone here has more time to make an improvement in a realm that the time was tied up in maintaining the old way of doing things. And now that's not on the table anymore. What's your excuse? If you're like, oh, this sucks. It's like, okay, so there must be at least one thing you can do to make it better. Are you going to do it or not?
Well, and that comes back to, you know, I've been observing and interacting with a lot of different bartenders and a lot of bar owners and, you know, myself as a bar owner and my own staff around, you know, what happens if we get shut down again? Some places are getting shut down again. Places are being reeled back to 25% of their capacity. You know, how do we prepare? So that's been one major kind of approach of mine, is like, I don't want to wait for that to happen. So I'm kind of getting into this mode of assuming things are going to happen, assuming that we're going to get shut down again, that I'm going to be paying a mortgage on a building that I can't bring any public people into for potentially months at a time. I'm going on the assumption that we are, you know, that this is here for the duration, at least for a while. And I'm with you, Will. Like, I want to see it go away. I want to get on a plane to a rum festival. I want a daiquiri with like my favorite people. But it's, you know, I can't put my coins in that basket. I just can't. So one of the things that I've been doing, and I think a lot of my colleagues are doing, is like, what is the new product that we wanted to bring online and we just didn't have the bandwidth, you know? So we have bitters, we have 4 SKUs of rum in the marketplace. But what was the thing that we really have always wanted to make, and how do we use this time to make it and to get it out and sell it? And also, I think in the spirits world, the biggest thing that I've been really focusing on is like, how do we get rid of some of these incredibly archaic rules that exist in the 3-tiered system, that exist about RTDs and being able to direct ship, DTC, they call it, direct to consumer. How do we reel back? Because those things have existed just to support an economic hierarchy. Right. The top level of the hierarchy did not want to relinquish control of, and they should be held accountable for putting smaller producers and smaller bars and bartenders out of business, because they're holding to this antiquated system that doesn't serve any of us. So how can we be able, as a bartender like Shannon, to be able to have this like R&D bar that she is able to then, have to-go cocktails. She doesn't have to be sitting in a bar that has, 60 people in it. She can have her own state-of-the-art R&D bar that's just Shannon, or Shannon and one other bartender with separations or whatever. And then, but you and I could stop by, or people in her community could stop by, or we could even get a bottled cocktail, that's shelf stable, shipped to us. There's no reason that those things can't happen. We're developing a rum club right now where, I put out to my community, what do you want to see me be doing right now? And it was interesting because a lot of people said, you travel all over the world talking about rum and sustainability and gender and all these topics, but you never do that close to home. And so next week, I'm, doing a series of events where I'm actually turning what I normally do inward toward my own closer community, and pairing it with, cocktail kits and to-go cocktails and stuff that people can be virtual with me, but they're still drinking Montanya rum. So, those are the kinds of things where it's like, I'm just assuming it's going to be bad for the foreseeable future, and trying to figure out what can we do because none of us had the bandwidth before to get rid of the 3-tiered system. None of us had bandwidth to like eliminate regulations that were in our way. So, I mean, some people did, but I love the idea of just kicking down hurdles in this time.
It's interesting that you bring that up because, and this may be my own naive perspective, because I'm very much more on the consumer side of things than I am like actually doing things in the industry like the two of you are. But from the outside looking in, it seemed to me, in very different spots of the country, we saw some regulations and stuff rolled back to make things easier on distilleries, bars, like in some cases to-go cocktails being allowed, in some cases distilleries being allowed to deliver spirits to customers locally and stuff like that. And it felt a little bit to me like kind of like maybe this is like a foot in the door kind of moment where, you know, we institute these temporary changes and like people see that the world doesn't end. Maybe it can lead to long-term changes. Do you see an opportunity for that at all? Like maybe, as you said, Karen, people having more time to focus on this now. Like, do you see people collaborating on, you know, working towards lobbying more for policies like this going forward?
Well, that was one of the first things we did was we went to our municipal entity with a group of other bars and restaurants, and we sat down with decision makers, town council, with the town manager, the town planner, and said, we're all going to go out of business if we don't figure out something innovative to do for the summer. And so we created a plan to turn our downtown into a one-way street, to add outdoor seating in the street for bars and restaurants, and even some outdoor display area for retailers. And I was part of those original meetings, and people were out in the street kind of looking at the space and talking about this. And the number of people who were like, oh my God, no, we cannot do this. We're not going to have enough parking. It's going to be ruinous to our economy. Our sales tax receipts are going to go down. And to make a long story short, we did it. We achieved it. We turned our street into one way. We added all the seating. The bars and restaurants got to sort of make it their own with cool, you know, decor. And I mean, you've seen this, I'm sure, around the country in different ways. But I met with two of those really vocal naysayers this week, and I said, "How was your summer?" And they said it was the busiest summer ever on record for them.
Wow.
And so that was one of the unexpected but really powerful bonuses for me. It was like, wow, we're changing perceptions, because, you know, we've never been able to succeed in getting one way or pedestrian or additional street seating in downtown. And we've tried for years, but all of a sudden we got it. And so COVID has allowed people to sort of get out of their box a little bit and say, how can we do this a little bit differently? And it doesn't happen unless people go out and literally advocate, I feel like. So trying to get involved in those advocacy programs to solve the real problems, which are people congregating indoors in high volumes in small spaces. We have to figure out how to eliminate that from our norm right now.
And Shannon, I'm interested to ask you on kind of the restaurant, bar, hospitality side of things. Are there any interesting examples you've seen of kind of collaboration, support, done in a different way during this time than perhaps people had thought of previously?
You know, I've seen bars host virtual happy hours with guest bartenders from other locations in lieu of a live event that I think is pretty cool. The thing that really comes top of mind is the way different bars have dealt with the RTD / to go. Like some of them are pushing it to a degree where the product is RTD, and that it's in a bottle and it's a sealed cap. Some bars are doing cans and, you know, kind of flirting with what does it look like to brand the bar from a commercial perspective. Like, how do we talk about what we do outside of you being in the space to make it happen? So I'm seeing a lot of people stretching their creative muscles to reimagine, how do I convey the experience of being in this bar space without you being here, and do it in such a way that it feels, I mean, I don't want to go too far, but maybe a little cooler than coming to the bar.
Oh,
don't get me wrong. I miss going to the bar. I don't think I've been to one in maybe 3 months.
wow.
I know, sad, but true. Anyway, my point is, I think that people that I've seen are kind of like focusing on packaging, and social media is a way to talk about that packaging. Okay, one prominent example is Hidden Harbor in Pittsburgh. Their
Yeah.
social media has always been amazing, but they really kind of like doubled down when the pandemic started, with video content, with informational content about what it would be like to visit it physically, with merchandise. Like they're basically kind of hitting it from all angles in a way that I haven't seen a lot of artists do. And I attribute it to the Tiki element, I think, of being like extra welcoming and extra hospitable. Maybe I'm a little biased there, but I think Tiki culture has always had that built-in element of just doing like extra over-the-top things that make people feel welcome. But yeah, definitely like that hybrid between different ways of hosting people online for happy hours from other locations, the to-go options and the packaging that goes along with it, and then the social media element that makes sure that everybody who's paying attention to that bar is aware of what's going on with those respective offerings.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'll have to check out Hidden Harbor's social media. I haven't seen it, but I'm not surprised to hear that they're doing cool things. I always when I hear them, I think about the collaboration they did with Maggie's Farm Rum in Pittsburgh, where they essentially partnered with them to kind of bring to the market their own house daiquiri rum, the Hidden Harbor blend, which is a really great product. And I just thought that the idea of like a local bar collaborating with a local distillery, creating something together was really cool. So not surprising to hear that they're coming up with other inventive solutions.
And that kind of, you had, before we came online, you had been asking me about just hearing from one of our customers in California.
Yeah.
Is, it's along those same lines where we're trying to, so I was thinking another thing that I decided I wanted to solve was like access, so like people want to go into a bar with a bartender like Shannon because then they get to be educated about what's cool, what's new, what do I need to know about, what's interesting, what's trendy, and that's really hard to get. Like you're just getting so bombarded with so much crap on the internet, and with not really knowing, like, is this legitimately good, or is this, so the more we can create access to the tastemakers and the real, experts like Shannon, I think the better job we will do to kind of help people to stay on that cutting edge. And so, for me, I was like, okay, well, what have I not been doing that people have been asking me for a long time to do? And that was another answer, was a barrel program. So we just had a retailer up in Sacramento, California, buy our first overproof rum, a whole barrel of rum that we just shipped out through Young's Market to California. It's specially labeled, bottled exclusively and hand selected by Rocco's in Sacramento. And it's 110, so it's like, people have been asking me to do an overproof for
right.
as I can remember. And I was like, well,
wait, where's my bottle?
Bottle. Like they bought them all. So that was another kind of in the same vein of what Shannon was talking about. Like, how do you take what you do, what you really specialize in, and strip away the walls, the four walls that you've put around it, and say, okay, I'm going to say yes to this, but I'm not going to say yes to it necessarily in a traditional way. I'm going to do it as a reward program for, so like a local distillery collaborating with a local bar to come up with that's something that we are totally in the process of, so that
awesome.
That our bars in Denver can now sell bottles out the door. So their own hand selected, to their specs, Montanya rum that is exclusively for them, brings people in the door to just get a bottle from a bar instead of from a retail chain or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so I really have to jump off of that thought, Karen. Totally spitballing, but it's only because I was writing about merchant bottled rums earlier today, and its history and impact on the industry overall. So, the opportunity you're describing is that first of all, let's go back to 3-tier. Let's knock it down, right? So knocking down 3-tier, and then you as a producer having an opportunity to interact closely with an account to help them create a product that they can pass on to consumer, right? So kind of reconfiguring how do these products get into the hands of people. And the irony of how this all came about is that we're isolated, we can't congregate, we can't get together, but that's a more intimate and I would say more meaningful way to get a product into the hand of the consumer. Again, just spitballing here, but I think that's a wonderful opportunity in terms of that customized experience we talk about that people are missing from a bar. How do we give it very personal touch?
Right, and going back to the concept of access, would I have taken time in my travel schedule to show up, for that entire staff of this place in California to do a staff training? I probably wouldn't have. I probably would have sent, my director of sales or my California rep or something like that. But how cool to, now we're creating this whole launch event for this barrel program with this Sacramento retailer that is me showing up, and yes, I'm virtual, but it's giving me an opportunity to connect with some people that I have really had trouble making bandwidth to connect with because I was on airplanes too much, and I was, it was just what life was like. And so I've done a lot of assessment of like, what will life look like when all the choke chains are off of us? Am I gonna go back to that? It's hard to say. I mean, yes, I will, because I crave the company and the ability to meet people like you and Shannon at, sitting at a bar somewhere at a rum festival, but I will go back. But I also don't want to lose that sense of connection to these folks who have historically wished for access and been denied it by circumstance.
Yeah, and when you brought up the idea, the barrel program, I wanted to ask because I've seen multiple distilleries in the US either start or kind of like really use this time to expand something like that they were already offering. And I've seen, Shannon, you were talking about having that like really customized experience for people. I've seen some distilleries doing like really cool stuff in terms of what that collaboration process is like with people who are selecting a barrel. And I was interested to ask, like, what does that experience look like for y'all at Montanya when someone, in California approaches you and goes, hey, like, I want to buy a barrel of rum? How do you facilitate that, across hundreds of miles?
Well, they're welcome to come, but as you can imagine, most people aren't coming. So we, so we just did another barrel program with our very first dedicated retailer from 12 years ago, which is here in Colorado. And, so we actually went to them because we could drive and take samples in person and do a small group outside sampling of these barrels that we were presenting to them. And so there are ways to do it, I think, depending on distance. But like we sent some samples to a Rochester, New York retailer, and you just label them really well. This is barrel X, and this is what it would taste like if it were 80 proof. This is what it would taste like if it were at a higher proof. And then get on a call like this with them and kind of taste through with them and see what they're getting, but also really to understand what's your goal,
Right.
And for most of them, their goals are really more complex than I would have guessed. It's not so much just having something that is rare and hard to find, but it's also that they want to be seen as a rum, having sort of this rum expertise, and they're developing and creating an identity for their liquor store, which they, if they were a whiskey kind of cultivating identity, then they would be ordering a whiskey barrel program. But, we're seeing that the simultaneous surgence of rum in the world and excitement about rum, and recognizing that rum is so complex and as good as any other spirit in the world. I'm seeing people be like, I've always wanted to learn more about rum. Now's a good time. So kind of cultivating an identity for their retail operation or their bar, this is a good time to convert to being a rum bar, a rum focused bar. So seeing a lot of real pivoting toward rum. I don't know, Shannon, if you're seeing the same thing.
Well, I'm a little biased. I think it's always a good time to turn towards rum, but hearing the example of your recent experience with this client here just really points back to the roots of how the rum industry exploded on the global stage, which is contractors, and right now I'm talking specifically about the British Navy, working with distillers in the Caribbean, primarily in Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana, and Jamaica, most notably, to say, hey, we need these kinds of liquids because this is the flavor profile we want. And you see houses like EA Skier doing the same thing. And then you see various merchant bottlers based in London doing the same thing. And that has not stopped. Recent or contemporary examples would include Maison or, Bellier, Maison de Whiskey. And that's the thing that's always been fascinating to me about the rum industry is this collaboration between the expertise of a distiller and producer, having this dialogue with a merchant who wants to interact with their end user, their clientele. Okay, so kind of like breaking up who does what, but somehow coming up with this really amazing result in the end. Sometimes it's a little too much for one person to interact with the consumer on one hand and then do the production on the other. It's like, let's just break it up. You're good at making this stuff happen. You're good at aging it and blending it. You're good at understanding what your consumer wants. And I mean, Karen, tell me if you see something else, but I don't know that there's another spirit category where an arrangement like this has been, developed to such a high degree and to a successful degree. And I think it's one of the things that makes rum special, not just the liquid itself, but the way there's this relationship between like various individuals to produce this quality end result and get into the hands and the glasses of people. I love this. It's almost like a full circle situation that I think the rum industry has a basis in, a history in, that we can tap back into, get into our roots.
Well, and you really, you were making me realize as you were talking, Shannon, that, in this time period right now, this really unique time period after George Floyd being killed and, the United States becoming much more committed to and versed in JEDI, justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, I just said those backwards, but you know what I meant, work. One of the things that I have loved the most about watching what rum is doing in the virtual world in terms of Zavi and the American Rum Report, and also, bringing in these Caribbean voices and international voices of rum, Ian Burrell, and it's like rum was already there. Like our industry was already so diverse and so beautiful. And I just, occasionally catch a glimpse of like the whiskey or the gin world or whatever. And I think, wow, you guys have a long way to go to sort of being an inclusive, equity-based community for, for people of color to be participating in your industry. And that was one thing as you were talking about, just like realizations of the moment. Like rum is on the rise, but rum is like this beautiful home that no wonder I've loved it for so long. Because it's, it speaks to my ethos and my ethics and my morality in a really different way. So that was one thing. But the other thing that you made me think of as you were talking, Shannon, is that, I've come to realize that, we're not always easily going to be able to get So if I want to do a collaboration with a bar or a retailer or somebody in an urban area, one of the coolest things that can happen in a lot of places now is that someone could come in and pick up a mini, so they might not want to buy that full bottle of Montanya rum, but they might come in and pick up like 350 mLs of Montanya rum, and then I can collaborate with them to create these opportunities for people to, again, get their hands on the rum or get their hands on a good cocktail and support bartenders. And so I just ordered like a colossal number of minis for the first time in my kind of life as a distillery owner, because I really foresee that 50 ml samples that are TTB approved are going to become one of the ways that we communicate in a pandemic with our customers, is to be like, okay, you want to taste Montanya rum, go down to American Elm in Denver, or go down to, the bar in LA or a bar in San Francisco and grab a 50 ml or 3. I just did our Exclusiva as a 50 ml for the first time, and then go on home and here's, where I will be online at this time, and I'll run you through a tasting, or just go to YouTube and do the tasting, maybe not live, but so minis, I think, are going to be a key factor for bartenders, bars, restaurants, retailers, and brands, craft distillers, makers in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, speaking as a consumer myself, like the more minis, the more 350 ml options there are out there for me, like the more excited I get, because it just makes that access so much easier and being able to try things. Man, I looked up and realized it's already 1. I feel like we could keep talking for another hour. I do want to remind everyone, feel free to send in questions if you have any. I think we have a few more extra minutes. I don't know where it went. I saw a question fly by from Facebook, which is something I'm sure both of you have probably been asked pretty frequently during this time. But essentially it was, how can, as consumers, we continue to support both of your industries, both from, there's the patronage side, but then also one of the ways I'm kind of thinking about it now is seeing both of you go out there and try to do so many different things, be it online events, tastings, other stuff. What's the best way that consumers, enthusiasts in the community can support those efforts?
Go ahead, Shannon, if you want to start.
I think it's important to support your local bar. And, I'm going to kind of veer off a little bit. There's something we didn't get to talk about, but I think it's really important to consider, is that, the bars are the front line of the consumer, right? And so bars are buying products from brands based on what they think their guests want. So if that link goes missing, I think a lot of information and conversation is going to be lost. And that feedback that goes back to the producer to influence how they make their offering, I don't think that's going to be a good thing. Also, why do we like rum in the first place? Yeah, it's delicious in the glass. Don't get me wrong, I generally drink it neat. But what makes it accessible to a lot of people is the cocktail, right? And that requires the bartender. And, I do think about and question, like, what is the fate of the bartender in an age where bars are not a thing? I became a bartender because I would go to bars and I was like, oh God, that was so cool what they just did. Without that inspiration, without that person to show you the way, are we in a type of prohibition? What is our labor force going to look like? Not just from like, oh, it is a job. It's like, is there an example? Is there a way to train up the trade? So with that being said, support the industry by supporting your bartenders.
Yeah.
Well said.
Definitely. One of the things that we're doing actually tonight, which is kind of not, so this is not specific to bartenders, but we're sponsoring an organization that is bringing live musicians into a studio to do live performances online. So tonight at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, we're doing a live sponsored performance with a band called Banshee Tree. They're amazing. And, you know, Banshee Tree, if they were normally going to do a performance, they would have to draw from the people in, you know, wherever, and they might get a crowd of 150 people or 200 people or whatever. And, you know, all of a sudden this live performance is going to be available to, you know, 5,000, 10,000 people, and they are a lot. People are buying tickets for this, so the money goes to the musicians. It's not like they're being asked to do an online event for free. So there's a good feedback loop there. But another really tangible thing that I'm involved with is I'm collaborating with Spirit Hub, which is a company based out of Chicago, big online and delivery spirits. Craft distillery retailer, and they have created, and I'm on the board of the Spirit Hub Distillery Preservation Fund. So one very tangible opportunity would be to you know, donate for, like, especially like a bigger company or a bigger, you know, more resourced entity, or even like a company, like a retailer that's doing better than ever in the moment of COVID, because their, you know, their sales are up, to donate to the Spirit Hub Distillery Preservation Fund. And our board will funnel those donations and those funds into distilleries that are, for 10 different reasons, really struggling right now. Because for me, that's a priority, is like keeping craft distillers that were really small and already, you know, that was me 5-8 years ago, like just on the edge of survival anyway, trying to help them to get through this time and be there on the other side. And so yeah, I'm working on a lot of different levels, I would say, musicians, bartenders, you know, so we're collaborating with a Latin American bartender who she's just makes these gorgeous online videos. And so we provide the rum, we, you know, kind of amplify and boost her beautiful production values through our own network. And then we pay her per kind of use. And I think there's huge opportunity for that, for bartenders and experts, you know, of Shannon's caliber, to collaborate with brands like mine, where we're not just asking to be affiliated, we're paying to be affiliated, because it benefits us, you know, when their content and the production quality is so gorgeous that it makes us look good, you know, stuff like that. So
absolutely. Well, this has been phenomenal. Thank you both so much for taking the time to have this conversation in a place where the public can experience and participate in it as well. Before we go, is there anything else either of you would like to add or touch on?
Well, I like to say the family that rums together stays together. So, you know, Karen, it's been a pleasure, you know, from the jump. And I you know, I'm glad to be here. That's what I got to say. And, you know, in terms of people who are watching, you know, I would say, your industry, yes, it's difficult right now, but don't focus exclusively on that. There's a lot of opportunity. You just got to let some things kind of roll off your back and just make you your mind. You're like, hey, I want to make something happen. If that's what your intention was prior, then now you just got to pivot and find another way. They say the obstacle is the way. So I believe in you.
I would make a little shout out, and I hope this is okay, Shannon, but, you know, we've been working closely on another project, which has been that Shannon's sister had a stroke, and there's a GoFundMe campaign up online, and Shannon's whole life for the last, you know, 3 months has been really shifted by needing to provide 24-hour care for her family member. And so in addition to COVID, as a bartender, as a, you know, with the bar program that she was primarily involved with, being a you know, a casualty of COVID, I just feel like I would love to ask you all to think about searching up Tamika's.
I'm putting a link up to it right now, by the way, if that's okay.
Is that okay?
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been, I just have been really aware that, like, on top of it all, when I have a hard day or feel like I'm getting my ass handed to me, I'm not providing 24-hour care to a family member at home who's had a major health event. So kudos to you for keeping your positive attitude with that layered on top. It's huge.
I'm saying the rum helps. So thank you.
Yes. All right. And Will, thank you. You are
Oh,
such a
absolutely.
in this industry, and I'm really glad to call you a friend and a colleague.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. And I mean, it's an honor for me to host women of your caliber for anything like this. So I really appreciate you both taking the time to do this today. If you're watching in Crowdcast, I just put a link up right underneath the stream to the GoFundMe that Shannon put together for her sister. So definitely go support if you can. But yes, thank you both so much again. And I know I'll be seeing you both again soon somewhere on the internet, hopefully in person at some point in the not too distant future. But until then, thank you again, and take care.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Karen. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Bye.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.